Okay, let's start. So again, welcome to the UX Greece meetup. I'm Ioannis Feneris. The co-organizers, Dimitris Stathis, Panagiotis Zacharias, Dimitris Niavis are also here with me. This is a joint event of Athens and Thessaloniki UX communities. You can follow those communities in the meetup.com for more events on the UX domain. We want to thank our sponsors who support those events, Janssen Labs, Anixe, the UX Prodigy, and then From Scratch Design Studio. Thank you very much for everything that you provide us. So, as we said, we have some great gifts to give, and this is how you can get them. It's very easy. Just say hi, introduce yourself, say thanks to our speaker, Kara, ask anything you want, trigger conversation, open a topic, and do this in LinkedIn using the hashtags UX and UX Greece. Please use both of them. From now and for the next 5 hours until the end of the day here in Greece, we're going to gather those posts tomorrow and find who are lucky enough to send them their books. Okay, and after this small intro, it's time to welcome Kara Pernice to our meetup. Just let me remind you that we need your questions. Drop them in the chat starting right now. You can ask Kara directly in the QA after the presentation, or Kara may check your question while speaking and talk right away. So don't keep them for you, drop them in the chat, and let's see where we stand regarding user research and research operations. Okay, Dimitris, you can get it from here for a proper introduction on Kara, and Kara, being a big warm welcome to our community. Welcome.
Thanks, so glad to be here.
It's great having you here, finally. I don't know how much I can tell about you. I don't want to spend more time than you speaking to us. So I'm just going to say that Kara is a UX research powerhouse with more than 30 years of experience. And she's currently the Senior Vice President of NNG, has created this whole UX certification program and many more beautiful things. Kara, the floor is yours. We're waiting for you.
All right, awesome. I love that you said I'd done many more beautiful things, Dimitri. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
That's quite a compliment. I'm happy to be here, and thanks for organizing this. It's great to be here with you guys. And as we were just discussing, I wish that I could physically be there. Who doesn't want to go to Greece? I've really only been to Greece twice before, but both times I loved it. It was amazing. Athens, Mykonos, Paros, Santorini, and then I went to that little island Syros once. It's just beautiful place. So love to go back sometime. Yeah. And yeah, I was showing these guys that I have my little "You speak Greek but you don't know it" book. So balakalo, everybody. Thanks for having me. So yeah, I work for Nielsen Norman Group, and I have recently created a course about ResearchOps. So when Dimitri and I were talking about what to speak about, I said, how about ResearchOps? Because it's on my mind. So, as Ioannis said, I'm happy to take, hear your comments or take questions about anything related to research or UX design or whatever. So about research, or about me just a little bit, I have been doing this for quite a long time in many different roles. If you want to connect with me, here's my LinkedIn information. Feel free to go ahead and do that, and feel free to keep in touch or hashtag to Nielsen Norman Group or anything like that. So I have been doing design and research in many different capacities for a very long time, and it really is my passion. I love to gravitate toward operations and leadership, but also toward things like senior citizens, accessibility, and enterprise and intranets. Those are some of my kind of pet areas over the years. Oh, and eye tracking, I suppose, too. But so what is ResearchOps? I know some of you guys are probably incredibly experienced in ResearchOps, and others maybe aren't even really sure what it is. So maybe we'll start here with a bit of a definition about ResearchOps, which is sometimes spelled many different ways. I don't think it's been totally standardized yet, so you might see it spelled in any of these ways that I have listed here. The kind of running definition for ResearchOps is what it says on this slide. It's the people, mechanisms, strategies that set user research in motion. So it's about roles, tools, and processes really needed to support research. So it's really not about the actual research, it's about supporting research and scaling research. So that's what the ops part of it is. And this particular definition comes from the ResearchOps community, which I feel like we owe a lot of credit to, because since about 2018, this community of now thousands of people have been doing so much work and creating resources that are reusable, that are already of a high standard, that any of us can take and massage and use to our particular organization's needs. So I really encourage you, if you have not already, to check this out and partake in some of the information that they've provided for us and for our community. So it's really amazing service. Now, so ResearchOps started to become kind of popular around 2018 when Kate Towsey tweeted about it. And it really took off after that. And lots of people have been leading this charge. But ResearchOps really isn't a new thing. It's something we've been doing for a long time. So I thought it might be kind of fun to look at some ResearchOps examples of old. And you can make as much fun of me as you want, because these are from a long time ago. So this was one of the first articles I published that were related to ResearchOps. I did this with a colleague of mine, and this was in a technical journal called IEEE, and this was in 1994. And with this, the people that I worked with at Lotus Development, we were really trying to get everyone to understand that anyone can participate in user research and benefit from it. And so this article is still, you can find it out there, you know, but 1994, people were doing it before me. This is just when I started doing it. So, and look at, you have to see these slides. I had to clean out my attic this summer because I was getting it, or last summer, because I had to get it re-insulated. And I found these gems. Look at this presentation that I created back in 1996. Like, I mean, come on, that clip art. And it was really, though, it was about usability. We called everything usability back then. We didn't call it UX. We did say things like interaction design, but usability was the umbrella term used back then. And this was really about educating the team about how to be involved in user research and iterative design. And then, you know, another one from 96, this was how can you truly get involved? And I love the bibliography. This was way before I ever worked for Jacob, but it's like a bunch of Jacob Nielsen resources. Then the notion of democratization, we were really ahead of our time, because I remember talking with designers and saying, you know, you sometimes are going to need to do your own research, or talking to people who weren't researchers and saying, you're sometimes going to need to do your own research. And this democratization of idea of having everyone do research is something, you know, lots of us started teaching people about a long time ago. And I'm telling you this theme, not to tell you, oh, wow, it's from 1996, but just to say that this is still important and still relevant, and one of the tenets of ResearchOps today, which is teaching people who are not necessarily researchers how to do research and how to do it well. And then this other example where we were trying to teach people that they didn't understand who the user was necessarily. Like, you are not the user is one of our mottos at Nielsen Norman Group. And we were, you know, trying to really get people to understand that in 1996. And this was an actual debate that I had with Chauncey Wilson. Actually, this one wasn't, the next one was. This is another thing about how we use databases to actually share information with people across the organization from our research. This was the debate with Chauncey, which was about, should our research information be in a bugs database or in a special database for usability? And we still have these same discussions today when we talk about research repositories. The basic lesson that I've been hearing from folks who are successful with this is you need a tool that's going to be, of course, helpful and keep the information that you need to keep, but you need to use a tool that people are actually going to use, and one where the user information isn't going to get lost. So that was the, you know, the root of our debate back then. I know we've been talking about this for a long time. Just a couple more examples, if you'll indulge me. This is the first research repository that I ever created. It was in around 1992, 93, and I was working for a company called Lotus at the time. And this was planning and tracking. So in this database, we tracked which things we planned to do. So this included what I now call strategic research and everyday research or responsive research. So strategic research is the research that is based on things like top tasks, areas of the product that are really important that need to be researched. So it's planned. We make it part of the schedule. And it's things that we need done, like things that basically would be risky if we didn't do. But this type of system in operations also enables you to track requests from any other teams or requests from your own team, and to track the current kind of just-in-time research that often needs to be done that you couldn't have planned for. So this kind of strategic research and responsive research can all be tracked. And the idea is that it's transparent to everyone, so they know what people doing research are actually working on, so they can kind of help to prioritize that work and think about budget and team size and plans for the future. And this is my second to last example. In this one, I created the same repository stored research findings. And so what I found when I worked at large organizations was that there were a lot of people that could benefit from research findings. People in support, people in training, people in sales, people on teams. Like I worked at organizations that created lots of products. So knowing that great minds think alike, I realized pretty early on that designers would come up with similar design patterns across the organization. So if we did a research study on, say, search filters for one product, another team might be able to use our learnings as they're designing filters or something like that. So it's kind of this background, this report about the research that was done, the methodology that was used, and what we learned, and then any recommendations. So it gives you this picture. The reports give you a picture of the research that happened. And we ended up opening it up to everyone. Anyone could read this stuff, anyone at the organization. And it was amazing. We used to be able to look at the logs of who was reading it. And I quickly learned that people all over the organization were using these data. So we continued to do that. And then the last point I wanted to bring up is the notion of atomic insights. And this became the notion of atomic elements. So small nuggets, right? Small research nuggets or design nuggets for that matter. I feel like Brad Frost made atomic, that notion of atomic, really important in the early 2000s when he was teaching us all about responsive design and what made responsive design. And then later, Tomer Sharon started to talk about this notion of atomic research nuggets and tracking them. And so the idea is that a research report, let's say you do a research study and you write a report from that study. That's a great thing. I still believe in writing reports because they give you the story about the whole study. But how do you talk about, how do you track that each research insight from the report? So I learned pretty early on that that was necessary to do. So part of our operations was to take every report that we created and enter each insight in its own form. And by doing that, we were able to then track those by what we researched, the product, what research study was done, but more importantly, what was the insight? What have we done with that insight? Has it been reported? Has it been iterated? Has it been deferred purposefully because we've decided we don't have time? And this little atomic kind of type of work is, I swear, what got me to be part of product teams. When I was first invited to be part of like project meetings, I remember the project leader would go around and ask people, what's going on with development? And they'd say, oh, at this point, we've usually created this many things and we have this many bugs. Or they'd ask QA, we have this many bugs, this many are showstoppers, and this is how many we've fixed. Then they'd come to me and I'd say, yeah, it's going really well. We're iterating design and we're researching a lot. And they were like, ugh, and I realized, I'm like, I am not speaking their language. They all had charts, they had expectations. So I said, I could track how much research we're doing, which would be important when we weren't getting much research done. So to be able to say we're doing research is great. But what I wanted to track was not just that we're doing research, but are the effects of our research. So that's what this was. By reporting things as high, medium, low, and then saying what has happened to them, that's where we got listened to. So I created charts. And when they said, what's going on? I said, okay, we've found at this point, say 30 high show-stopping problems. Of those, 10 have been reported, 10 have been deferred, 10 are being worked on. And then and the project leader said, well, wait a minute, the owner, whatever we want to call it, said, wait, what do you mean there are 10 high problems that have been deferred? And I said, well, they're not part of the schedule and we're not able to actually design it or code it or test it or write content for it. And they were like, well, why? Pat, can we do that? And they're like, yeah, we can move these things around and blah, blah, blah. So it was like, I just had to sort of track it and speak their language and summarize each item as its own insight. So this is something that is a theme today that is really helps research ops become stable and grow. And so we want to kind of think about that. Are you doing this sort of thing? So thanks for walking through history with me and some of the themes that I think are important in research ops today that have been important for many years. But research ops has really exploded now. Like the growth in the UX field, this is Jacob Nielsen's chart where he's actually, creating an expectation for growth as well. And he feels like, for the next 30 years, we are going to continue at the trend that we have been following for many years. And I agree with that. And with that, we really need operations to streamline and improve our processes. Now, at Nielsen Norman Group, we always like to do our own research, of course. So we have another definition of research ops that my colleague Kate Kaplan came up with, which is really similar to what I think the research ops community came up with, but homes in on a few things that we think are important, which is the orchestration and optimization of people, processes, and craft in order to amplify the value and impact of research at scale, meaning small research teams, no research team, to massive research teams, and many of them. And thinking about that, we think about the topics of things like governance, knowledge, tools, competency, advocacy, and research participants kind of needs their own little element there. What does this all mean? Well, really, research ops, good research ops is really enabling people who do research to focus on research. So they're not focusing on other elements that can take kind of time away from research. And this notion of people who do research is one I really want to kind of focus on in this little discussion today. So this initialism, I think, was made up by Kate Towsey. Don't quote me on that, but I believe she made it up, certainly popularized it, which is, and she's the head of research ops at Atlassian, which also provides tons of wonderful resources about research ops for us. So the idea of people who do research, what does that mean? Well, they're going to be researchers, and they're researchers sometimes based on kind of our traditional thought in UX about researchers, which is maybe they're in a role where they're called a researcher, or they at least have the experience in different research methods and knowledge. Maybe they have education in it. But people who do research are also people who research by just because the need is there, or they have a desire to do it, or both. Maybe they don't have the role at all, or experience, or knowledge, or education. So we're kind of trying to cover the gamut here in research ops and democratize this so no matter who you are, you can do good research. And in the latest surveys I've been doing, I summarized this bit of data, which said this past December, we had 353 people like you, kind of UX people answering this survey. And 25% of the organizations have no dedicated researchers. That could mean they're not doing any research, or it could mean they're doing research, but it's people who are not really dedicated researchers. So who is doing research if that's the case? Lots of other folks. Designers may or may not consider themselves to be researchers, certainly product management. This is another survey that I did last year with my colleague Raluca Budiu, and we were trying to learn about, who is currently doing research and who should be doing research. And we asked people based on their role, or we divided it based on people's role on their responses. And so this first chart shows people in product, so product managers, their response, and then the responses from people who are in UX. So when we asked them about what types of research, who should be doing it, we found that for discoveries, this first cluster of bars is about discovery research. And UX people are mostly saying it's UX's job. It's the first bar in the UX cluster. And product people a lot of them are saying it's UX's job, but some of them are saying it's their job. So we're seeing like a differentiation between what people believe is their job versus another role's job. And we kind of see this with user interviews, user testing. Why does this happen? Maybe there are no UX people. Maybe there are no researchers. Maybe product thinks they can do it better. Maybe, maybe the UX people are there but don't have time. So, there can be certainly very positive reasons for other roles taking on this type of research. And there can be negative reasons for it too. Like there can be job overlap and people not realizing whose responsibility something is. So I think one of the huge lessons from this research that we did was the notion that we need to communicate really well about the tasks we're doing related to research and who should be doing them and who's going to be better at them, who's going to be more efficient, and fill those gaps when someone who needs to do the research maybe isn't the best at it. Can we do something to help them out? And who manages research? That was another thing where we had some differences, like product did think that it's UX's job to manage research in many cases, but in many cases they thought it was their job, where UX thought it was more their job. So it's like, this is where we have problems when we can't communicate and decide who's going to do it this time. I think one of the lessons that I also learned is that we don't have to say a certain type of research is a certain role's job always. We could say, for now, for this project, for this time period, whatever it is that you choose, just making sure that you communicate with one another about who's doing what and why is really important for operations. Now, we had several people in this survey in UX roles saying that when people who are not researchers do work, do UX research work, they're not doing a great job. And we want to be careful about that. Like, how do we deal with this information? First, is it true? Sometimes it's going to be true. Is it not true? Maybe we need to take a look and decide that. But if it is true, what do we do about it? Let's try to be productive. And that's partially communication. It's also education, but it's also delivering reusable tools for people. So what can you give to people that can make them better researchers, even if they're not researchers at heart, per se? And it is really just bringing us back to this cognitive bias, the Dunning-Kruger effect, where people think they can basically do something that they really can't do. And unfortunately, people don't tend to be incredibly self-aware, and they don't realize that they're not good at it. But before we get too smug, everybody, all other fellow researchers out there, before we get too smug, just remember though, Dunning-Kruger really is not about them, it's about us. That's the whole point of that cognitive bias being studied and shared with people that Dunning himself said, it's really about us trying to notice what is it that we might not know. You know, can we open our minds and try to figure out what is it that we don't know rather than pointing the finger at what other people don't know. So as we come into this kind of ops role, so we're thinking more about the operations of research and not so much the research itself. We think about the mentality. What is the mentality of research ops, or what are the roles of research ops? So today we see some roles in research ops. They're actual people whose job is to do operations work. And what are those types of roles? Things like a research op leader or manager. And that person is one who basically orchestrates sharing of tools, analyzing quality of resources and things like that. Another role besides research ops leader we'll see is like participant recruiter or participant manager. And this person's whole role is to recruit the right kind of users for user research and manage that, manage their privacy, manage their data, and make sure that's all kept on the up and up. Another role we'll see is an administrative role in research ops, where they may do some participant management, you know, data recruiting or data management, and then they may do other things like help share things or share reusable tools or help manage the types of tools that we have subscriptions to or things like that. So administrative person. So we'll often see a leader. When we see research ops, we'll often see a leader, someone in either a participant management role or an admin role or a combination of these types of things. So there are actual roles that people do. And experts in research ops say that a research ops role doesn't necessarily have to be a researcher. You could be someone who's just highly organized and really communicative and very thorough and persistent. And you don't necessarily have to be a researcher to do well at research ops. Another way to think about research ops is not so much these roles, but the mentality of research ops. So like I was saying, designers, product managers, researchers, research leaders are doing operations stuff in addition to research. So you know, we want to really expedite and streamline that because we want to keep in mind the notion of opportunity cost. So that what is opportunity cost? In business school, they talk about it as something you're giving up to do something else. So every time I need to recreate a script before I do a user interview, the opportunity cost is I could be teaching someone else to do research. Or every time I need to go and hunt and find the best consent form and edit that consent form for the research study I'm doing. Every time a product manager does that, they could be doing better product management work. That's the opportunity cost. So this is kind of the business reason for doing, one of the business reasons for doing great research ops. It's the idea that if we have reusable and good systems, processes, and tools, then people can spend their time on the things they should be spending it on, and not the stuff that could be easily just kind of reproduced or shared among and between teams and people. So when I first made this slide, I thought of it as roles of research ops, things we're supposed to do, but I changed the word from roles or responsibilities to obligations. I feel like it's our obligation when we're trying to do research ops to actually support and streamline and improve research, no matter who is doing the research. And I'm not saying let's just all let bad researchers do bad research. I'm saying the opposite. Let's let people who need to and want to do research, and let's help them as much as we can to do it well and quickly. And where do we focus? So this is kind of an infamous map that was created by the research ops community, and it encapsulates, sorry, that was hard to say, so many of the elements needed for user research, and really is trying to kind of focus people on these areas when they're thinking of their ops, but where do you focus? So I came up with this model that I like to think about. I call it the VICE model. And a vice is something that could be looked at as negative because it's squeezing people, but it's also something that holds something in place while you're trying to do an action to it. And that's why I think VICE is a good acronym for these topics that are foundations of user research. And those are: V stands for viable, I is influential, S is sound, E is efficient. So VICE. What do I mean by that? So viable is the entity of research. It's kind of a strange concept, but this notion of who is doing research, no matter who they are, this has to be something that's going to continue. So even if, like, my best researcher leaves the company, this system, this entity, this culture, this feeling, the processes are in place that research will continue even if that person leaves. So that means it's viable. This goes to the idea of kind of maturity in a lot of ways. It's influential, which means we're not just doing research. The research is changing design based on what we learn. So that could be in discovery research, we may change the idea for a product we're thinking of creating based on some field research and interviews we did. Or for typical iterative design, we might be changing designs weekly or each sprint or however it is that we're tracking our development based on research that we did. So it's influencing design, it's influencing the business. Sound, the soundness of research, it's got to be good research. You know, we just can't do the wrong method at the wrong time and say that we did good user research. So we need to be really doing things in a fair and structured and balanced and earnest way. And then efficient. This is where the ops part comes in a lot, which is making things move as quickly as possible, and doing the right thing at the right time. When we think about the elements to improve this VICE model, I really think about craft, efficiency, influence, and culture. So when we think about these, the craft, that type of stuff, craft and influence, are really going to focus a lot on individuals. We're really going to want to help improve that for the people doing research. And they can go anywhere from, inept, just seriously bad at research, to like amazing and adept. So where are we in this pendulum? Where are the people doing research, and what do we need to provide to them to get them up to level, 5 or maybe 4 or something? These other elements, efficiency and culture, these things often are going to affect a team. So when we're thinking about these, we're thinking about processes, development processes, scheduling, and tools we have. And these sorts of things can be impacted by the maturity of the organization, but it can be impacted greatly. So when we have like a low maturity organization, like limited maturity, they may do research. Even emergent, I feel like emergent and structured are really kind of dangerous levels when we think about research and research operations, because a lot of times at that phase, organizations are doing some research and they think it's good enough, but they may be in one of these places where the research is actually poor research, or it's not enough, or it's not done at the right time. So these are the types of things we're going to look at when we think about our maturity. Now, I kind of also think about the stages of ops, research ops. So we've got so many of these sort of ideas of where could we be in these different areas for being a researcher, or our research ops, or our organization's UX maturity. And for research ops to be the best, you're going to be really flourishing. You've got a leader, you've got a recruiter, you've got needed ops roles, whatever they are, and it's just flourishing, and things are fast and efficient and sound. Versus you have some people who do research, but no operations at all, which means they're not reusing anything, they're not sharing anything, they're not teaching people, they haven't made it embedded in the development process. So we can be anywhere on this spectrum. Last couple bits. So I like to think about focusing on staff, planning and measuring, accomplishing, and teaching and sharing. And these are the types of things that if we're able to do these elements, then we can make research better across the organization and basically prove it to people as well. So the other areas we can look at is the quality of the research that's being created and the efficiency of the research. So if you want to kind of put yourself in a box, you know, we all hate to do that, but if you want to kind of put yourself in a little box right now to think about your research ops, we could have low efficiency, which is the lower left box, and low quality. So that's people with no research skills doing the work, plus research ops. They're set up to fail. They don't have the time, they don't have the training. Or you could have quality research ops. So you have researchers doing research, or research leaders doing research. Or you can have really high quality and high efficiency, where you have people in research ops roles doing research ops work. So that's where we, you know, really start to flourish, where we have designated people in those roles, or at least people in other roles who it's truly part of their job to dedicate that work to the ops part of research. And we can also look at other factors, like besides just the quality and efficiency, we can look at things like job satisfaction and the credibility of research, or the research team, or researchers. And again, if we have people in research ops roles, or people in roles that are defined that they're doing ops, that's where we really see this flourish and the sweet spot. So I'll leave you with these questions, is to really think about, where does your organization need to improve most in your research and research ops practices? And home in a little, where does your actual team need to improve? And then if we even focus a little further, where do your people who do research need to improve? And then to focus one more time, where do you need to improve most to make your research ops practice more beneficial? And yeah, so that's my last slide. I think I went a couple minutes over there. I hope that that was helpful. I saw some questions going by, but I thought that we'd maybe take them at the end instead. So thank you for those questions. And I saw a few like exactly, what do you say? Should we do some Q&A, guys?
Of course. Kara, thanks a lot for giving us all those insightful information. I see there are a lot of questions, so let's start this Q&A party. Just let me, can you just stop sharing the screen to share my screen and show the select question in order to be visible to everyone? Dimitris, would you like to pick a question and start?
Sure. Let's start with Amy's comment. Amy says that I've been shouting about these great things like democratizing research since 1996 or earlier. Why is it so hard to get implemented and understood in organizations?
Oh, Amy, I'm with you. Why is it hard? I think there are a lot of reasons for that. I actually did a video about this, because I think that one of the things that makes research and research ops difficult is the fact that research is usually not part of the development schedule. If you do like lean to the letter or agile to the letter, research isn't part of that plan. So we have to focus on things like lean UX and adapting those models. So that's the first thing. Like I equate this to, everybody is playing, let's say they're playing soccer, right? They're playing football. And in the middle of a football game, we throw a baseball or a cricket ball, whatever you play. We throw that in the middle. They're not going to listen, right? And that's why, like, when I first started doing research and we wanted to do contextual inquiry, for example, it really got a bad rap. People said contextual inquiry doesn't work. Nobody listens to it. What we really learned over the years was that contextual inquiry works amazingly, but you need to bring that data to your team at the right time, or involve your team in it at the right time. Because if somebody's like already got a schedule and they're already designing things, and now we say, oh, we discovered this product isn't right, nobody is going to listen to you, right? So I think one of the main things is making research, planning research, doing research, and responding to research findings part of the planned schedule and backlog is like the number one thing that would make our job so much easier. Because I think a lot of our work depends on our charisma and negotiation skills, and it shouldn't. It should just be part of the process. So I think that's one of the main reasons we continue to sometimes bang our head against the wall. And until we affect the development process, that's not going to go away. But we can affect it. Like, I mean, I remember, you know, I would get wind of a product that was about to be created, and I'd find out who the product owner is and say, hey, can we talk about some of the strategic research we might want to do? And can we make sure this is part of the schedule? And, you know, it's baby steps. You do it as much as you can, and continue to train and educate people and make them feel ownership of research. And I think, Amy, you will make progress. I'm sure you already are, but you'll make more.
Okay. So, any thoughts on how we avoid the pitfalls of research democratization, such as people think that they're doing research?
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, I'd love to hear what other folks think of that too, but I think like telling someone they're doing it wrong usually isn't going to get them to listen, right? So it's like maybe subtle ways of showing them the right way to do it. I think continued training, like those silly decks that I was showing you, I used to train all the time. I still do. That's part of my job today, is training people about what different methods are. Like a couple of the case studies I've been, Dimitri, you were one of my case studies even, but I've been talking with people about what they're doing to make research successful and ResearchOps successful. And a lot of people have this practice of these training sessions, and they don't necessarily call it training. They call it like something fun. And what are the sessions about? They could be about UX concepts. They could be about research concepts. They could be about research findings. They're regular, they're fun, they're short. Other things that we do is go to the meeting somebody else already has. Like that's a big one, is don't make people come to a separate meeting. Ask people if you can go, can I come to your meeting for 5 minutes and talk about something about our users, or something that's changed about our users? That can be kind of fun for them to go, what do you mean something changed? And you learn about a new behavior or something like that. I remember one time I had this team that really wasn't into research. They just weren't into it. They weren't into design iteration either. And I asked, can I just come to your meeting and just talk for 5 minutes? And the owner said, okay, yeah, you can come. And the meeting went on and on and on, and he forgot about me, and the meeting ended, and he looked at me, everyone was walking out of the room, and he was like, oh, I'm sorry, Kara. I said, well, can I come back next week? He said, yeah. And I did. I came back next week, and the same thing happened. He forgot about me. And so now there's a little bit of reciprocity happening, because he feels guilty because I just went and spent hours with their team and they didn't let me talk. So I went back the third time, and he remembered me, and almost forgot me again, but he remembered me. And I started talking about some research findings, and the team was like so into it. They were so excited and asking all these questions. And so I said, oh, I think my time's up here. And he said, keep going, keep going. He let me keep talking. And then at the end, he said, can you please come back next week and take 15 minutes? And then I became a regular part of their meeting. And then that gets to be a problem, because you don't have time to go to every meeting and do that. But, you know, sometimes you have to do things you don't really want to do. And once in a while, you kind of feels yucky, like to go twice and be ignored. That really stunk, but then it worked out in the end. But I think just try again, and something will work at some point.
Great
insights.
I would like to ask John Pagonis if he is available to ask directly Kara.
Sure. Hey, John.
Are you here with us? Or I can, oh, you're here.
Yeah, hey. Sure, yeah.
How's it going?
So the question is, ResearchOps organizations, do they need, well, ResearchOps organizations need researchers researching how researchers research. True or false?
I think that some of them do, but I think that's a very meta question though. Awesome, by the way, John, of course. ResearchOps, to me, has to improve and make research efficient, make research better and more efficient. That's my thought about it. So can someone who is not a researcher do that? Is that what you're kind of asking?
Yep. And whether that is
Yeah.
necessary for ResearchOps to work.
I think that, okay, first of all, I think many organizations are at the inception here. The ResearchOps is just being born. So in that case, I think it's a time of organization. It's a time of finding tools and resources that are out there and compiling them, consolidating them in a way and sharing them. Who can do that? That does not necessarily need to be someone who's amazing at user interviews or contextual inquiry, right? You could be a good organizer, maybe a good leader to do that. As we mature and mature and mature, I do believe that you do need someone who has a very good handle on research methodologies to evolve your ResearchOps team to what it needs to be. So I think a mature ResearchOps team is likely to have someone, whether they have been an actual researcher or is schooled in it, to me doesn't matter. It's that they have the knowledge of research and an understanding of it that they can actually evolve their ops. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I was thinking, I guess, the end state where you actually want to be in optimizing state. And I would have thought that there, you need to be able to understand how researchers work, their flow, their processes, what they do. And to do that, you need to conduct and respond to research.
Right, yeah. So you do need to be able to, I mean, even at the early stages to organize stuff, you need to know which stuff is good to organize. Like if I take someone's task template and say, everyone use this and it's terrible, then that's bad ResearchOps, right? That's actually doing us a disservice because I'm sharing a bad tool. So there always has to be someone or someone's involved who can help determine what is of the caliber that we need it to be. So yeah, I think that's a great thought, John, to be considering for now and the future.
Right.
Thanks.
Another really interesting question. How do you handle cases where the way that research operations team, it highly affects the validity and reliability of conducted research?
How do you, sorry, Dimitri, what was the beginning part of that one?
How do you handle cases where the research operations teams affecting the research validity, reliability, and how it's
Affecting
conducted?
it negatively? How do you handle cases
yes,
when research?
I'm guessing that yes.
Wow, yeah, that would be a real drag. First cry. Once you finish crying, then, no, I'm just kidding. So you have a ResearchOps team, let's say, and they're actually, let's say, sharing tools and resources that are actually not helpful, not sound. Well, you could go the old school 1970s mentality and fire them, but that's never going to work. And it's also not going to be ultimately probably good for the organization. It's going to be more costly to onboard some more people. So you, again, I think you're doing the same thing where you're trying to train them on the right mode. That's a bad situation there though. Like if someone, it does bring up the point that you just don't want anyone doing ResearchOps. You want people that are qualified to do this. Otherwise they're going to be it's going to be a logarithmic issue, an expanded issue where you've shared something with a lot of people that's bad. So I think what I would probably do if it were me is I would directly approach them, not in front of other people, but in a helpful, as much as I could be positive and say, okay, can I help with these things and tell you why doing it this way might be better than that way. And I'd probably try to get some other folks to champion this with me in that way without making it feel like you're trying to squelch them, because I'm sure they're not trying to do it wrong. Nobody tries to do something wrong. So hopefully they would be open to learning some new ideas and ways to do it better. Yeah, I hope no one's in that situation. That sounds like a drag.
We have at least one person with us that's at that situation.
Okay. Do they have any ideas, anything you've done that's been helpful? Or anybody else have anything that they've encountered that has been helpful?
Well, you can unmute if you have anything to share with us.
Hi, Kara. Hello.
Hey.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
So I asked the question, so I might want to follow up on this one. Thank you for your responses. Quite helpful already, but when there's a certain situation and the team maturity is high, the organization maturity is high, but there's a highly regulated environment, and practically the ResearchOps kind of holds the keys and works very closely to security teams and the privacy teams, and they all collaborate in a way that they have certain blockers, and they kind of put barriers in every possible situation. There's also barriers from beginning from recruitment to, let's say, conducting research and recording. So all these things potentially harm research in the way that research is being conducted. So if you have any further thoughts about this, or more the hands-on of the research.
Yeah, that's a great point. So how do you pronounce your name? Sotiris, is it?
Yeah, sorry for that.
Okay, yeah, no, I've never heard that name before. It's nice. It does remind me of kind of user-centered groups that we've seen across your organizations that are trying to do things like design systems, or any kind of, like, in the old days, they used to call it auditing, like no one, auditing UX, but it's the same concept, which is like a central team is trying to put things together and have things done in a systematic and consistent way. And the reason for that, the overall philosophy behind it is, I think, excellent. I think it's a great idea. But in practice, sometimes it isn't helpful. And I have seen that in several cases. I mean, the positive thing is oftentimes these groups end up just kind of withering away. Like if you're having an issue, you're not the only one. So oftentimes, we're hearing the issues from lots of different teams, and then the team will end up either changing or going away or being reorganized. What do you do in the meantime? Like, you can't just wait for that to happen. I think the advice is try to work with them as much as you can, which is like, if they have blinders up or they're not listening, I'm sorry for that situation. But hopefully, a lot of times they do want to hear about ideas for making things better. So I would really just try as much as you can to work with them, and then try to band together with other teams. Like, if it's that bad, that's got to go away. That's got to change. Like, if every team is having an issue with that, it's not healthy for your organization. And also, it's hurting the credibility of UX if that's happening. You guys do have to take some ownership of that, because it's going to hurt you in the long run if everybody thinks everything related to research or design is going to be, bad. So yeah, I hope it goes well. I'm sending you positive vibes.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Thank you, Sotiris. We are constantly we discuss about this issue, but I want to bring questions from everyone to discuss the same issue from a different perspective, in order to be clear to the one that asked the question. So a question from George, if I am right. Are you waiting for product managers to ask you to research something? If not, how are you being listened to? So let's talk about PMs here. And this 44% of I am the one who do research. And let's open this discussion.
Yeah. Well, I think, like, what I was trying to sort of get at a little earlier, George, and everyone, is the idea of strategic research versus reactionary research. So no matter who's doing the research, I think we need to plan the strategic research. So the strategic research is the stuff that we say at the beginning of a project, even before a project. We say, what do we think the top tasks are? If it's a redesign of a product, we might say, let's look at our UX debt. Let's look at the stuff that we already know about that are issues that we purposefully deferred in the past. And these are the types of things, top tasks, things important to our organization, our business, things that we know don't work well, things that, we've looked at analytics and it's ignored and we don't want it to be ignored, and things that, that we already know about, basically. That's the stuff we say, okay, these are strategic things that we need to look at. Let's embed it in the schedule, make sure we have it researched and time to respond to the research. So that's, hopefully we're doing that strategic research. Then we've got the reactionary research. And this is the stuff that just comes up. Like some feature came up because a big client needs it. And we said, shoot, if we don't do this, we're going to lose, millions of dollars in sales, add the feature, right? That comes up. Or we didn't realize when we designed this that it was, we thought about this design abstractly, that it was going to actually have these elements. And we need to respond to that, the stuff we cannot plan for or predict. So and then there's other reactionary research, which is, I think this is important, let's research it, or something like that. Or we created this design and we didn't really think it was going to be in any way complex. So we didn't plan research cycles for it, but it actually is. So now we need to plan the research. So that's the stuff that we're reacting to. So I think in any project, we should have strategic research, and we should recognize there's always going to be reactionary research. We have to make sure we plan the strategic research, so we're not just always reacting to everything and then ignoring important things that we should be doing that no one has necessarily requested. So I'm not waiting for product managers to ask to research something, but I know it's going to happen. And that's, what to do with that is to track it and prioritize it against the other things we have planned and say, is this to you more important than researching this thing that is supposed to benefit 80% of our customers? They might say, no, let's not research that. Actually, let's stick with your plan. So I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, I think it does. And a follow-up question, who owns the backlog of research tasks, the research team or the product team?
That was, that one of those things on that chart was managing research. And, when we asked the question, the answers are different, and that could be a real problem, because at the same organization the answers might be different, but definitely across the world we do not have one common way to manage that stuff. So who owns it? Who owns it could be anyone. Who should own it should be someone who has the capability, the knowledge, and the time to deal with it. That's what I think. And those could be researchers, those could be research ops people, those could be designers, those could be product people, product owners, or product managers. But by the way, I think everyone has to have a say. Even if someone owns it, they shouldn't be like, they can't be the judge and jury. Like, other people need to have input,
Exactly. Thank you very much.
What do other people think of that? Does anyone else have a feeling about that? I don't know if everyone's like, okay, yeah, I agree with that, or no.
Please raise your hands, get into the conversation. Let's start this, not to be just a Q&A, but to be like a more regular conversation. Raise your hand to see you and give you, not give you, and to let you be part of the conversation. Yeah. Until then, Dimitris, any questions you would like to ask? Oh, we have a question. Okay, no, we don't. Okay, so Dimitris, yeah.
Well, I would like to let's dig in a little bit on who owns the backlog, and it's the product, is the research. Shouldn't this be defined by the goals of the company? Shouldn't this be something like a North Star that's connected to both of them, and we work together? Because it seems to me that we're spending a lot of time fighting each other over things that we should be a lot more simpler.
Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely that's a very simple way to say it. I think it should be simple, but it just, the thing is, people aren't simple. Like if somebody, let's say a product owner thinks that it's really part of their job and they're not doing their job if they don't do this, that's what they're feeling. Like, if I don't do this and somebody else does it, I'm going to look bad and I'm not doing right by my product because I'm not doing it. So it's all about really the communication, I think, and which one. Also, teams today are so fluid in their roles. Like, you don't always hire a researcher. You hire someone and it's like, okay, we think you're going to do design, but then you end up doing research and you end up doing IA and you actually end up coding sometimes, or, let's hope nobody's in too many of those roles where it's not manageable. But people's roles aren't always defined as just one role. So when we've got these roles that have many different types of activities they might be doing, it becomes very unclear. The thing is, like, people like these roles. A lot of times people like this variety. They don't want to do just design. They don't want to do just research. They want to be, doing different things, where some people like to specialize. So I think where organizations are trying to respond to the workforce that's out there, it's making it challenging for us to know who is supposed to do which things. And I don't really know the answer to that. Like, I don't think we should put it back to everybody has very, very specific roles, but I do think we just need to communicate and define who's supposed to do what and when.
Thank you for this answer. I can see Michaela, if I'm pronouncing it correctly.
Yes.
Okay, and then Konstantinos.
Can you hear me and see me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Hi, Kara.
Hey.
I have been to one of your classes many years
Oh, okay.
ago. Yes.
I hope you learned something.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So I come from the market research side of things, and I have been doing this type of research before it was called UX. And I have always been in integrated teams where market research, consumer, customer insights, however those groups are called, were integrated with researchers that do UX. So we all were in line with whatever the product development and strategy, because usually product is part of the marketing campaign, and it doesn't matter what you want to do, even at the user experience level, it's going to have an impact on marketing and what the company can do, what are the business outcomes. And what I'm seeing this trend now, talking about research ops, like something totally separate from the research team that does customer. We have been doing product research forever in the physical world, and the methodology and approaches are not necessarily different that you would do in the digital world, with some specificities, with some techniques. And a lot of those are adaptations of market research techniques. But since we have a lot of non-researchers coming to the UX, they don't know that we have been doing that for a while. And so I have seen those silos going, and that's people are losing the opportunity to learn from those who have been doing this for forever. Right? Market research has more than 100 years in doing research. So I just trying to look for ideas of how to talk about that need for communication if they are not going to be integrated because whatever the structure of the organization doesn't allow it, at least if they can communicate and collaborate and learn from each other and just connecting. Because what I'm seeing is, over time, if UX is not connected to business outcomes, it starts losing value. You go to the C-suite and it's like, okay, you did it for 5 user interviews, so what? So how's that going to help me to move the needle, right? It's not just about the user experience, it's about how does that impact the business in the long run. So I just open to ideas to hear about that.
Yeah, I think you brought up a lot of interesting points. And one of the ones I'm really kind of thinking about, Michaela, is the idea of research ops for all types of research. And because one of the things, I had this research assistant, Amy Zhang, and what I asked her to do was go and look up every research ops role she could find, because we were trying to find commonalities between the type of roles that are currently written out there. And what she kept coming back with were like market research roles and insights officers that had nothing to do with user experience. And so I was like, okay, wait a minute here. How do we deal with this? Because research ops in the UX field is still at its infancy. But as you say, market research has been doing this kind of thing forever and ever, you know? And so when I looked at them, I was like, all right, let's see, what can we learn from these other roles that are out there? And it did make me ponder this idea, like, how do we share between those types of groups? Like when it's not just sharing between people on the product team per se, but like, let's look at like what tends to be a totally separate team, which is the market research team, and what can we purpose and reuse there? And I think that would be, you know, ideal is to say, hey, you know what? Okay, most of us in UX aren't doing a ton of large scale surveys. And when we do quant research, it's often behavioral quant research, where marketing doesn't tend to as much go down that road. But there are other things that we do have in common that we could certainly share and learn from one another. And I think there's a massive opportunity for that, for sure.
Well, I think there is a lot of misconceptions about what market research is and isn't. And people think immediately about surveys. We do a lot of qualitative research and quantitative, both small and large. And there's a lot of concept testing in terms of product. There's a lot of user testing in the physical world. We call it product testing. And when you send the product to people's home and you observe it, we do ethnography, we do a lot of stuff that is being done in the digital world that people don't know, because there is this idea that we just do surveys, and it's not that. And again, when I was working on I run my own research agency now, but when I was working on the corporate side, we had both things together, because that was part of the same. Product is a key pillar in marketing. There's nothing to market if you don't have a product. And it doesn't matter if it's digital or if it's physical. The issues, and we deal with attitudes, with behaviors, with needs, everything that people think that is unique to UX is not. We have to do it on this side.
Yeah, I know. I have a lot to learn there too, even though I studied that in school. But like Jacob Nielsen has this really fun video about the notion of vocabulary inflation. And it's the idea that like we all kind of think we discovered something because we, you know, and it's like if we really went back and really researched, we'd see that a lot of the things we do, somebody's already done somehow before. And, you know, can we at least figure out what those things are in our own organizations and at least try to come together on that and learn from one another? I think that's an excellent message from the stories that you just told.
Yeah, terminology inflation really has done a bad number on UX, because when you start changing the labels to all techniques and to all approaches, then you lose the connection to the roots. And there's no way to go back and read about them and study them. Like I know people talk about user interviews. That really is a new name for IDIs, in-depth interviews. And so if you want to know about in-depth user interviews, then you have to go to the literature that comes from psychology and sociology, because market research is an interdisciplinary field. Sorry for just talking too much.
Yeah, no.
Sorry, Constantinos had his hand raised. Would you like to ask something?
I just wanted to add something on the previous conversation about product managers and if they're not owning research. But coming from the PM side at the moment, I'm trying to do this by myself because I'm working on a small team. I see myself organizing my research according to what the product needs, and I've seen this to other teams as well. That sometimes we do have some metrics that we're following, and we do our research based on these metrics. We might have some product goals, also business objectives that we need to follow. And sometimes this is how we organize our research around. So in the end, research is gonna inform the product. And therefore I think that product management owns research, but at the same time, it's the researchers who own their backlog and they're doing this on their own base. And the priorities also come from discussions between business, product, and researchers.
Okay, it sounds like, is it working well? It sounds like you guys have a good flow between the teams.
Well, in my current position, there's no research team, so it's a very small team at the moment.
All right.
But I've seen this in other teams that how there's even a UX data analyst who sits right in the middle. So they're trying to measure the UX data analyst and take some metrics either from like Google Analytics or Hotjar around the product, and then they inform the research side that, you know, there's something wrong here. Maybe we can look deeper into this, and that's an ongoing process, an iterative process that happens all the time. So maybe it's around the same concept of ResearchOps that might be some scheduled interviews or, you know, contacting users on a regular time, whether there is a problem or not. So there might be some things that you want to check with your customers, or maybe that during this period there's nothing wrong with the product or metrics, but we still want to get in touch and see if there's something that we're missing.
Thank you, Konstantinos. Yeah, Kara, do you have anything to answer here or to add here?
Well, I'm not sure there was a question in that, right? I think you were sharing an example, right?
That was more like a comment on the previous question that was around who owns research,
yeah,
design or product management.
Yeah. So I mean, I think it's a great example that you're describing of like just making it work. Like you're just making it work with what you have, and you're communicating with different teams. And I think that's exactly what we have to do, you know, and then finding a way to then say, okay, what are we doing well? How do we reproduce that? So we don't have to think of it all from the start again next time, you know? So that sounds great. Thanks for sharing that story.
Thank you, Konstantinos. Kara, I have a task for you. Can you see the raised hand there? I'm gonna let you pronunciate the name of. Okay. Isn't it in this book you had? I think that this name should be in that book. Okay, it's Myrto. Myrto, hi. Give us your question.
Hello,
it's
Kara.
Muto is how
Myrto,
you pronounce that?
Myrto,
okay, I would
yes.
not. I would have said no. You don't even want to know what I said. Muto.
No, I would like.
Muptwa.
Okay, yes, that's right. Because yeah, Ro is perfect. I forget every time to change my name in English. So, Kara, thank you very much. If we were running short on time and the client wouldn't want to invest in research ops, to be honest, regularly they don't want to invest in research. Would there be a very quick or fast or concrete way to actually do research ops, but in a short version? Could we use some key points of research ops methodology and just go with them?
I think that reusable resources is the best thing. Like having users at the ready for any research, like that's one of the things that, you know, when I asked people about what are the barriers to doing research, the number one barrier people said was time, but another barrier was being able to find users. So I think like having a relationship with a recruiter or building, you know, if you're saying clients, then your clients probably have many different types of users. So I think if I'm right about that, I might want to build a relationship with a good recruiting agency. So when I'm ready to research, I can get the users right away. You don't want that to ever be a barrier, finding users. So I think that's one kind of quick and dirty way to get research ops sort of started, is like participant management through a tried and true third party. And then other sorts of methods that you tend to use a lot, like when I think about user research and clients and in UX and what we do, we're often doing user tests, like basic, you know, evaluative user tests. We're doing user interviews, we're doing field studies and surveys. And what you could do is look across your clients at which things you're frequently doing or what would be most helpful for them in terms of research, and shore up those elements. So it's like, what do I need for a user test? I need a script, I need tasks, I need ways that I can teach my observers to take notes. I need ways to have my observers follow along in the study. I need an outline for a workshop for analyzing and prioritizing findings. And it's like, so some of these like key things that you know you use in your most frequently done methods would be the things that I would start creating if you don't already have them. So it's like, okay, you can say this client doesn't want us to spend a lot of time, but all I have to do is kind of fill in the tasks, follow the outline for this workshop to have them review it with me, and follow the outline for this workshop for summarizing the data. So you can kind of expedite some of those things. So I would try to think of it that way. Does that make sense, you think?
Yeah, I think totally.
Yeah.
Thanks, Berto. Thanks, Kara. I have another question directly in my messages from George. George, would you like to unmute and ask the question?
Hi, Anis. Yeah, sorry, no camera here. Yeah, I was the one who asked about the product manager's questions before, but the mic was not working. Thanks a lot, Kara, for the presentation. One follow-up question regarding what you mentioned about strategic versus reactive. Unfortunately, I didn't have much chance in the past to work in companies that are doing much or at all UX research, and I was wondering how it mostly works from your experience. Like, is it mostly is it part of the job, as you said before, trying to create the product, to gather everyone and agree on the tasks of UX research, or the tasks are usually the same, that they just give you a blank page and then you come back with findings? So do you need to communicate and bring everyone on board on something, or this is not necessary as part of the job at the beginning?
Okay. If I'm hearing your question right, George, like I think you're sort of asking about how do we plan this and who do we involve in it?
I mean, if you have seen like friction, you know, from other, like as I mentioned in my former question about product managers, maybe you have seen friction also from others in the company.
Yeah.
And if this is something that is troubling you, or not actually. So if this hasn't happened, yeah.
Yes, it troubles me, and yes, it happens. But so I think when we plan research, before we've created a design, let's say, whether it's a specific design or a design for an entire system that we're creating, we can have some ideas about what the top tasks might be for people, what people might want to do with this thing, even if we don't know the design. So when we're creating strategic research plans, what we might do early on is say, we're just going to need to research how people do this. And they're probably going to be a rough set of features related to this. And with that, each feature is going to have to be studied. So we'd say something like roughly what we think our research questions are. Now, at the time, then we can say, okay, this research question is going to need to be researched with a high fidelity visual prototype. You know, so that kind of thing, you need to be a good researcher to be able to decide. I take a research question and I want to know, do people notice this thing? Do people notice it? Well, that's going to have to be probably a clickable prototype and a high fidelity visual prototype. So that takes some knowledge about doing research to know if what I want to put in front of the user or the method I want to use is going to be appropriate to answer the question that I have. So I think in early phases of planning research, we can be kind of broad and abstract and say there's an area we want to research. And if we know our more specific research questions, we can note them here. But as we move further and getting closer to doing the research, we need someone who's really, really close to the design, be it a designer or a researcher, to help us decide what can we research with what we have, or what do we need to do to change what we have to research it. So that would be, you know, someone with that skill But to get anyone to be involved and to listen, they've got to be involved in those discussions. So that's going to be the developer, the engineer, that's going to have product, any stakeholders. Like I like to think of it as anyone who can either make a design much, much better, or anyone who could ruin it. Like anyone who has that kind of power or influence needs to be involved in the research planning. But when we get to the details of it, like someone, let's say a designer who doesn't know much about research, like, they exist. They might say, here, researcher, here's my prototype. And I want to know, do people notice this? But they've created something that's low fidelity visual. And we know we can't study that with that thing. If we can't get an answer to that question, we need this thing. So people need to be involved from the beginning to the end, but who does like specific work and who kind of approves what we can use to learn the answer to the questions we have is going to have people with those, it's going to have to be people with those skills, which are researchers, basically. That was a very long answer to your question. I hope that I answered your question.
That was a great answer.
Thanks
Thank
very
you,
much
George, for your question.
Thank you.
Dimitris, I think you have a question now. Dimitris Stathis.
Yes. Hello, everyone. So, we've been talking all this time about problems in research. And as I can see, we have been trending between two, let's say, parts. The two parts are the stakeholders and those that perform research. Based on your experience, could it be, what would be the biggest problem in research right now? Because as I see it, could it be the stakeholders' bias in the beginning, or maybe could it be a common case that research is performed, maybe, I don't know, not in the proper way, which might lead stakeholders to lose faith or even confirm their already lost faith, or anything else? I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, Dimitri. I still really do think one of the biggest problems in research today is really the idea of time and being able to do the research that needs to be done at the right time to influence what it needs to influence. So what I was talking about, the development schedule before and having strategic research plan, I really think that's still our biggest issue. I don't see a ton of people saying, I don't want to do research, or research isn't important. They at least know that that's kind of not cool to say now, like at least even if they don't truly believe it, they at least know like, I look pretty close-minded if I don't even like want to do research. So like I wouldn't say that's gone away, but I don't think that's the biggest problem. I think the biggest problem is people have different goals and objectives, and they have different marching orders, if you will. So when they're caught off guard and asked to do something that they don't have time for, that's where the problem exists. And I think that really goes back to the planning, doing better planning and having it as truly part of the backlog and the development schedule. That's my take. What do you think?
Well, yes, I think that based on various projects that I've been, it's the problem is always that this is not part of their understanding. This is not part of their planning. And when the time comes that they might understand that, oh, yes, if we had some research done, that could have solved some questions that we have right now, but now it's too late. And it's always too late. And as long as it's always too late, it's never going to be planned. So it's something like a vicious circle, and it needs to be broken sometime.
Yeah, I mean, once it's too late, you can say, look, if we had done this, so when are we planning the next project? Can we start doing that now? I think it's our job as researchers to know when to stop doing evaluative testing and to say, okay, I'm done. This project is as good as it's going to get right now. And it's smart for me to move off this project to different pastures and start doing discovery research on the next project. So it's like having that discipline to go, oh, okay, we've iterated this enough, and the value I'm going to truly bring is to start working on the next project and getting in there early. I think that's something that we can be, really good at as researchers.
And one thing, if I may add, that we might need to, let's say, present research to those people that are not taking it seriously, or they are not planning enough, or they are not proposing to do such things. Take them into consideration and have research presented like in a language that they understand, like in KPIs, like in metrics that they can comprehend and understand that this needs to be part of the actual product process.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just saying it differently. People have different, they have different goals. They're bonused in different ways. They're paid in different ways. They get raises or promotions in different ways. So, and then people are different. So that's why saying things in different ways when we're talking about research, I just am a big fan of that. Numbers for some people, emotions for other people, examples for other people, predictions for other people, like all different things that we have in our kind of, I hate to use a war term, but our arsenal of tools. Like we can try something different, and you're going to touch someone at some point. You just have to keep at it.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks,
Welcome.
Dimitris.
Thank you.
We have a few more minutes. I think we have, can we answer one or two more questions? Kara, are you okay? Thank you very much.
Or should we sing a song or something? Is there a nice Greek folk song we could all sing? By we,
Okay.
I mean you guys.
We can do this after
dance along.
stopping the recording. Okay. I see that Raphael has a question. I think we have a lot of questions that cannot cover right now, but you can ask them in LinkedIn and trigger the conversation there. Sorry for that, but we have really dozens of questions. So Raphael, please, your question, and then we can ask one more regarding performance that we have this topic like a lot. Raphael, please.
Hello, everyone. First of all, Kara, thank you so much for your class. Okay.
My pleasure.
Yeah, so I have a question for you. So I'm working in a project at the moment. So I had an idea that I think you'll be very profitable and you engage more users. So I presented to my manager, which is the head of the design team, and he said it's like stunning, it's amazing, but to convince business people to invest money on that, I need to research and prove some numbers, like how much money do you make it? So do you have any tip for me to gather this information? Like I did some like estimations, okay? But of course I saw similar features on competitors' apps, but of course I don't have those numbers, of course not. So do you have any tips for us to reach this kind of information?
Yeah, I mean, it can be difficult, but it's like, it's a bet. You're making a bet, basically. You're making an educated guess that is a bet. And you're saying, I believe if we do this, it will result in this, which may mean this many more euros or whatever the case may be. Exactly. I think, what you've done is that's what I would recommend you do. And just, can you get a little bit more specific with it? They want to know, why are you coming up with those numbers? Like, can you give a confidence, a ranking? Like, I really believe this because of this. Why? Last time we did something like this, this is what happened. Like, could you find somewhat parallel examples and any benchmarks you had related to those, and give them some transparency into the numbers that you're coming up with? Like, I believe it's going to make us $20 million more. Where are you getting $20 million, right? Like, a really basic example that we always use in enterprise software design, or intranets in particular, is the notion of time savings. So it's like, so when we do that, we'll say, people at your company on average cost this much money per hour. It takes people this much time to just look up a phone number. That's done X times a year. We are spending in salaries this much money for people to look up a phone number because you still have it in this, archaic system or something like that. We could say this is costing this much, really. Like, the transparency part is, we've done research and people do this roughly 30 times a week, right? Whatever it is. But I'm going to actually even I'm going to be generous and I'm going to lower that. I'm going to say people only do that 10 times a week. And even with that, we're still making this much money. I found that making cases like that goes a long way. So you give them like the main case. This is what people are this is what people are paid. This is how much time we believe they're spending. This is what we would save if we changed this to be this way. But even if we use these numbers, this is what we'd save. You know, and that's like, it's like, okay, now we're only saving 2 million, but that's still 2 million. And I feel like kind of giving people the framing, if you will, okay, the big savings would be this much, but even if we only save a little, we're still going to save this much, you know? So I think like giving them some, you know, high and low points and the reasoning behind the figures you're coming up with and making that really transparent, I found that helps a lot in the long run.
Okay. Thank you. I got your point. Yeah, that was, I took some notes here, so for sure I will improve my research and hopefully they will accept my idea.
Yeah, I hope so. Let me know how it goes. LinkedIn me. I'd love to hear.
Okay, I will connect to you.
Yeah, cool.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
So much, Kara.
And we have a similar question from Konstantinos. I think organizations underestimate the value of UX, of course, research because the value is not always measurable. What are the best metrics to track in order to prove UX research works? I think, Kara, you answered this field. Any other? I have a question to add here. I was talking to a CEO the other day and the research team, and the CEO asked, okay, so I believe in user research, but you're a team. So what is your performance? How I can measure your performance? Are there any KPIs, any quantitative indicators that you are better than last year, that you are better than this, any benchmarking? So
yeah, you know what's funny? I think that it's sort of, I think there's so much rigor in many cases in UX, and we're trying so hard to be sound with our research, which is great, which I believe we need to continue to do, absolutely. But like when I think about some of the business measures that I learned in business school, like there's always some, like I said to you, Raphael, you're always making some kind of a bet. Like somewhere you always have to say, okay, my confidence in this thing is this much, and we're going to run with it. And I think in UX, we sometimes fear that a little bit. Like we kind of want to make sure that everything has been researched like crazy and we shouldn't use numbers because we don't, you know, I just think that we could make some more leaps and still be, you know, accurate and sound in our research. So like, if I go and get some, let's say I look at the analytics for something, let's say there's a page that has some product that, you know, we think should sell this much, right? That number that like marketing comes up with that says we should be selling this much or we want to be selling this much, someone had to make a leap to say that's that element that we're striving for. And I think in UX, we're kind of fearful to do that sometimes. And we could be a little better at that, like saying, all right, we want to make this much on this page. So let's look at the analytics to do that. Let's take an average people might spend on that page. It's whatever, 50 euro. If that's the case, let's run the math. And then because that's what people in business do. Like they don't always have, you know, algebra is algebra for a reason. There's a variable, and, you know, we can set the things that are, we believe set, but there's always going to be a variable, and those set items are the ones we want to be as confident as we can be with. But like a lot of times in UX, we think so many things are variables that really we could say, yeah, this is likely. Let's like say this is true, and just be fair and honest about what we know. So I do think sometimes we're a little too rigorous is the wrong word, but we want everything to be perfect before we will say it or present it. And sometimes we can't do that.
Yeah, in our way to handle assumptions and hypotheses, we don't want to risk anything. So we are keeping our voice down, but business can say, let's risk. Great. So let's have another question about maturity of UX. Dimitris, you have a question by Panagiotis, is this right?
Yeah, but Panagiotis is here with us, so please, Panagiotis, unmute.
Hello, guys.
Hey, Panagiotis.
Kara, first of all, thank you very much for being here with us tonight. It was
Thanks.
really wonderful, and what you have shared with us is invaluable.
I'm glad.
You know, as a great guy, UX researcher, you know, I'm asking about a pain, a Greek pain. It's about the low maturity of most UX, most companies in Greece. And I would love to ask, how can we start talking about research ops to these kind of companies? I mean, I'm thinking that maybe it's some kind of luxury, or is it useless to talk about research ops to these kind of companies? Can we talk about it, and can we start implementing research ops structures in some way? Because believe me, this is the vast majority of the companies here.
Yeah, that's interesting to hear that. I didn't realize that, so that's good to know. I do think ops is something that can be discussed even with a low maturity organization. But I think what we have to do is be really specific about what it is and what we're going for. So maybe talking about the concept of ops might not be as effective as saying, what I want to do right now is pick reproducible tools that's going to save us time and money and bring up the quality of the research we're doing. So like maybe pick and choose elements of ops and home in on those, focus on those, say the value of doing this is going to make us able to do research. We don't have to hire researchers, as many researchers, because we can train people who aren't researchers to do it, right? Like maybe pick what are pain points to low maturity organizations, which is usually not enough tools, not enough planning, not enough understanding, and pick those things which are the reason for ops, like are the reason for research ops. Pick some of those specific ones and talk to them. So I think rather than like making it feel like a layer of something that we don't already have, like we don't have high UX maturity, we don't have researchers, so now let's try research ops. It's like, no, that's probably not going to work. I would pick elements of ops and try to grow those and try to do it based on specific pain points you have.
Great. Thank you, Kara.
You're welcome.
Okay,
these are
Kara,
fun questions. We're all over the place here.
And there are a lot more, but unfortunately, we don't have any more time. But you can ask your questions to Kara in LinkedIn. You can share the conversations there. I think Kara is active there, and I think that she will check them and give her knowledge.
I will. It might take a little time, but I'm happy to. Totally LinkedIn me, and it was really my pleasure to be here with you guys today. Balakalo, Eifaristo, right? That's
Thank you very much. Thanks for being here with us.
Thanks for having me. All right.
Sharing all those valuable knowledge, answering questions. I hope you enjoyed it.
I loved it.
I'm sure that everyone enjoyed it. And before we end this session, please.
If anyone does have an ops example they might want to share, a case study, definitely LinkedIn me, because I'm always looking for new examples of ops, of either something that was amazing or something that just worked. It could also be just a little example. So thanks for letting me do that little ad.
Great. Before we end this session, I want to remind you that you can win some great books from our sponsors, Zansi Labs, Anixe, the UX Prodigy, and the From Scratch Design Studio. Go to LinkedIn, post anything, post a question, ask Kara, say thanks, say hi, introduce yourself, but use the hashtags UX and UX Greece in order to find you. And we're going to gather the post, find who are the lucky ones, and send you a message to arrange the deliveries. I think, stay tuned to Athens UX Community, UX Saloniki meetups, and of course, UX Greece events in the next months. And I think that's a wrap. Thanks everyone for being here, and see you again very, 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 very soon. I cannot tell how soon, but very, very soon. Have a great night. We are going to stop the recording now, but I'm going to leave the call open if you want to just have a more informal chat. Kara, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Hope to
Next
see you
time
in
in
person.
Greece. Next time.
At the first
I'm
opportunity.
gonna bolt. Thank you so much for having me. Bye, everybody. Take care.
Bye bye.
Bye, Kara. Thank you.
Goodbye.
I'm going to leave it. I'm going to stop this
Recording.
Oh, I stopped that. No, I didn't stop. This is the time now.